wolf is back in the Netherlands. For some, it's a symbol of successful nature conservation. For others, it's a source of concern, fear, or anger. The debate is intense and often black and white. You protect or intervene, you let them live or you remove them. But wolves don't care about our opinions. They respond to space, stimuli, people, dogs, and boundaries, or the lack of them. In this episode of the podcast Animal Matters, we move beyond slogans and emotions. I speak with Italian wolf expert Prof.Luigi Boitani, one of Europe's most experienced wolf ecologists. Since 1972, he has devoted himself to the ecology and protection of wolves. He has been, and still is, involved in European policy, scientific research, and recent reports on so-called bold behaviour in wolves. He is president of the Large Carnivore Initiative for Europe, and together with David Meach, he published IUCN contributions on the subject of wolves, including the entry in the Red List. Also joining us is Ecologist Erwin van Maanen, who brings his expertise and direct involvement in several incidents to help explain the situation in the Netherlands. They talk about what we know and also what we don't yet know about wolves in densely populated countries like the Netherlands, about habituation to people and dogs, and the key question, when does wolf behavior become a risk? This podcast conversation is meant for anyone who takes the wolf seriously, whether you're in favor, against, or mainly looking for substantiated information. Welcome, Luigi. Welcome, Erwin. Good to have you both joining me for this podcast. The first question is for you, Luigi. You are one of the leading wolf experts in Europe and have been involved in this field for decades. Could you briefly explain from which role and expertise you view the current wolf situation in Europe and especially in the Netherlands?
Thank you. Thank you for this invitation. Well, I have been working, in fact, on wolves since 1972, when we trapped the first wolf in central Italy and put one of the earliest radio collars in Europe on a mammal. And then in the beginning, my work was mostly on finding out more about wolves so that we could manage them in a better way. And then throughout the decades, my job has shifted more and more toward the management, the conservation, the political aspects of managing wolves, and the most important, the interactions between wolves and people. Because in the end, I mean, conservation of the wolf is actually a problem of managing people, not managing wolves. They know what to do without our intervention. The situation today in Europe, broadly speaking, is that we have many more wolves than in the past. Certainly, wolves have expanded their range and they have increased in number in many parts of Europe. In Spain, Portugal, in Italy. In Italy, we have probably 4,000 wolves. So it's one of the largest population we have in Europe. Wolves expanded in Germany and, as you know very well, in the Netherlands. And they expanded, they came back to Scandinavia. And so they really did a lot. Why they did it? Well, first of all, the wolves are one of the most adaptable animals on Earth, probably compared to the rat and humans. So they can live everywhere and they can feed on everything. They have a very flexible biology in terms of behavior, ecology, and whatever. So if you let them do what they want, you will have them downtown together with people, no doubt. And this is the main reason. The other main reason has been the abandonment of many unproductive or poorly productive fields by agriculture, especially in the mountain areas, in the hill areas, and which have been repopulated by large herbivores, wild boar or deer or whatever. And of course, the wolves took advantage of that and expanded. So there are other reasons, including the conservation law, including increased awareness by the local people and so on. But the two key reasons are the flexible biology of the wolf and the availability of large empty areas where they could expand.
An important question. In August 2024, you sent a letter to the Dutch government calling for action. What was the immediate reason for writing that letter at that particular moment?
Well, we received, when I say we, first of all, sorry, I'm speaking on behalf of the Large Carnivores Initiative for Europe, which is a group of experts from all European countries. And it's a specialist group of the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. So we were receiving news about the situation that was building up in the Netherlands with confident animals or semi-confident animals, the great enthusiasm in many people in approaching the wolves, in taking pictures and so on. And at the same time, we received information that very little was done at the level of planning on how to manage all that. So we predicted that there could be troubles. And in fact, there have been troubles. So we wrote a letter as a warning.
Okay. Erwin, do you want to say something about this?
Yes, certainly. So I've been following the return from the wolves, say, from my work around the millennium in Romania, where I met Luigi as well once at one of the last Carnivore Initiative meetings at the time in the mountains. Totally different setting for wolves than we have here in the Netherlands. So over there, it was very, very difficult to actually see a wolf. Wolves were quite shy because they're being hunted as well. Well, say from around 2006, we saw the first wolves entering into Germany in larger numbers and spreading out. I went to see the situation there. And then I followed the whole route of the return of the wolf up to the Dutch-German border, where I encountered a very different wolf than here in the Netherlands. So wolves there are usually still quite shy. Landscapes are greater, emptier, especially in the northern Germany. There's less population, less interaction between people and wolves, which makes it well, the fact that wolves become less shy, not so much of a problem over there. And then I saw the wolf returning in the Netherlands, where we saw the first cases of habituation. Actually, there have been two cases where there was actually a physical interaction between people and wolves. One case actually leading into an interaction with total of 4 people, so that wolf had to be removed in the end. So we see a situation where we have a densely populated country in the Netherlands, where there's a lot of interaction between wolves due to recreational activities, people having activities everywhere. And also, as Luigi said, we see a lot of adaptation from these wolves. So they become less shy, more visible, also due to more interaction. And wolves that enter into environments that are never thought possible, looking back now about 20 years ago in Romania.
Talking about bold behavior, the report Bold Wolf Behavior December 2024 states that much of our knowledge about wolf behavior comes from remote natural areas with very little human presence. Does that mean we still know relatively little about how wolves behave in a country like the Netherlands? Luigi?
Well, we don't have many data, hard scientific data on the behavior of confident wolves, but we can predict what happened. And I would feel quite confident. As I said earlier, the wolves are extremely adaptable. They learn very, very quickly to adapt to the local situation. So there is no wonder that a wolf that is not chased away, that has a, let's say, a character, a temperament, or more exploratory, it just come close. He doesn't find any opposition, and he come closer and closer and closer. Why not? So when looking at the wolf behavior and ecology, this is what I'm repeating always in my talk. I mean, the first question you could ask yourself is, why not? Why not? And people wonder, oh, they really come downtown Amsterdam? And I would say, why not? What's against that?
Be funny, I have to see them strolling down the Kalverstraat in Amsterdam. How problematic is the lack of knowledge when wolves live in landscapes with high population density, intensive recreational use, and very little true wilderness?
We don't need much data to manage this situation. I mean, if we want to coexist with wolves, we have to manage the interaction. The interaction means that if wolves do their business without interacting with us humans, let them do it. But when they come to interact with us humans, then we have to take the lead and decide what to do. We cannot allow wolves to be so confident that they can become potentially dangerous. Yeah. I mean, nobody has been killed by a wolf in Europe now for quite a long time. We don't want to start that. So I've been protecting wolves for 50 years, so I can feel quite confident. To speak in favor of a plan where the interaction between wolves and humans is carefully managed by humans to prevent and avoid potential negative situations.
In the same report, it suggests that wolves that repeatedly come within 30 meters of people may be strongly habituated to humans. Can you explain what habituation actually means when you talk about wolves?
Habituation means that the wolf has learned that nothing negative happen if it comes close to humans. So again, why not? Yep. Wolves are curious, and they would come close to humans to find out more. What is this? What's going on? Is it good for food or not? Or is good for playing? We have some interactions filmed actually in Italy, beautiful, of a younger wolf that came close to humans just to play. It was like a dog, like a dog standing low on the front legs and trying to provoke the humans. He just wanted to play.
We have the same here. Just recently, a wolf biting in somebody's ankle, a young wolf. It looks like play, but when it becomes an adult, it could turn into something else.
It could.
And perhaps it's good to elaborate. It's often suggested that habituated wolves are fed wolves, fed by people, which in some cases is true. But I also think that it's the interaction, the closeness between people and wolves, which makes some individual wolves lose their shyness towards people because there are no consequences. And also the character is, I think, a factor as well. They're just like people, there are different personalities, which may place a wolf in a more strongly habituated situation. And I think also ecological factors are involved, like, for example, the wolf Bram, GW3237M, was a wolf which came very close to people and went biting people in summertime, which is curious, and which may have something to do with the fact that it had to get a lot of food for its family, and its character together with the closeness with people, which caused it to interact with people physically, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's not only due to wolves being fed, I think, which is often suggested.
That brings me to the question that research such as wolf behavior towards people, the outcome of 125 monitored encounters, 2002, shows that wolves rarely display defensive behavior towards humans, even when pups are present. Some people interpreted the behavior of the wolf Bram towards children as defensive because it occurred during the period when the pups were around. I ask it from both of you. What is your view on Bram's behavior towards children?
Well, I don't comment on Bram specifically, but let me tell you one thing. I have never used and will never use the word defensive behavior. The wolves don't defend anything. I would call it avoidance behavior. This is true. They try to avoid situations where they feel unsafe, where they don't know what's going to happen, and so they may be cautious. So it's avoidance. But defensive, I mean, in my life, I've been taking wolf pups or hybrids from a den 3, 4 times and went there when the mother was there, and the mother immediately quit and returned as soon as I quit the den. So, I mean, there is no defensive at all. It's only avoidance. And this is very important to know.
Yeah, it is important because I think a lot of people who do not know anything about wolf behavior felt sorry for that particular wolf because they said he's only doing what every good father should do, defend his children.
This is bullshit, really.
Well, I have to say, in all fairness, that Bram was a good father. I've observed Bram with his pups, and I've also been very close to the pups in Bram's presence, but he never showed aggressive behavior at that time. And I agree with Luigi, also looking at scientific data, is that wolves normally don't aggressively defend their cubs. There are examples of wolves barking from a distance, for example, like a dog would do, but never aggressive interaction. Unlike, for example, a bear would defend its cubs and attack, for example. But I don't know of any examples of wolves doing that. And also, in my experience, being close to dens, wolves, the parent wolves always being out of sight or even whining in the presence of me being there.
I probably know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Wolves that look at people or follow them are often perceived by the general public as friendly. People don't see or hear aggression, no growling, baring of teeth, and so on. As a behavior specialist, I would say that if there are no clear signs of friendliness, this behavior should be seen as exploration. Do you agree? And if not, how should we interpret wolves approaching people? When is it harmless and when does it become concerning?
Well, it's very difficult to say when it's harmless or not. You may have a wolf coming very, very close to humans and be completely harmless, and some others who could be dangerous even from a distance. I don't have an answer to that, but I would say that when we prepare a sort of guidelines on how to manage confident wolves, we set arbitrarily the distance. So you said 30 meters, for example. I mean, it could be 50 meters, it could be 20. We had to choose an arbitrary threshold to say, okay, beyond that, we have to intervene. Just let's consider that the wolves and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a matter of finding an agreement on how to manage wolves, possibly all at the same level throughout Europe, or at least at national level, so that we have clear guidelines for the people how to manage the presence of wolves.
And in the Netherlands, of course, we have this escalation system where we say, of course, we use this arbitrary measure of 30 meters, which was actually devised for wolves in more remote areas, like in Finland, for example. But of course, in the Netherlands, we have much closer interactions, which are not always harmful. I think it's fair to say from the cases that we had two cases of wolves actually biting people. And if you look at the history, there was one wolf which was already as a pup quite close to people, interacting very closely, possibly being fed as well by photographers. There are indications of that. And then a few years later, that wolf actually went to bite a person. When we look at the wolf Bram, we don't know much about his early history, but the wolf was born in the Netherlands, also in a busy recreational area. So it was raised close to people. And then it started to investigate dogs, for example, in its settlement area. And it went on from there to actually bite, first of all, a girl, then bite another girl. And then the latest attack was actually firmly biting a woman in the lake, and the last attack was actually dragging a boy into the forest. So it escalated from there. So we have to look at the very early stage already when wolves start to interact with people, and also perhaps with dogs and people or dogs alone. Might have to judge it as being problematic behavior.
You just said that wolves coming closer to humans, that we don't know in advance how the wolf will react on humans. Well, logic, it's a wild animal. But how should people cope with it?
Well, I love wolves, and I always suggest people to enjoy the possibility of watching wolves, but from a distance. I'm very much in favor of keeping and maintaining the distance between wildlife and humans. There is no way that we can become friend of an animal like the wolf to the point that the wolves come close and behave as a dog. The wolves are not dogs, are wolves, and we should make all possible efforts to maintain the distance. So if a wolves come closer, we should chase them away and be nasty to that.
I'm going to make it more difficult for you. If they are nasty, they throw a stone and they yell and they wave with their arms, and the wolf just stands there. Then
Okay.
what?
Well, my suggestion, and I know that will not be liked by many people, my suggestion that in this case is we are considering a potential confident wolf and should be removed.
I want to ask you something else. In many animals, individuals living in protected areas under low hunting pressure are far less wary of humans, whereas intense persecution leads to heightened stress, increased flight distances, and long-term behavioral changes. Is it conceivable that wolves were not originally wary of humans, but developed this wariness as a result of hunting and persecution?
Difficult to speculate on the past. That is so distant past. But certainly we can say something on facts. We know for sure that wolves have been attacking and killing people in big numbers, especially children, young shepherds, people walking badly with a stick or so, something like that. And this has going on for many centuries until the end of the early 800. What really made a change in the story is the fact that humans invented guns, and wolves immediately learn that humans can be dangerous even if they are distant. So they increase their distance from humans when we use guns. I mean, we can have figures supporting this shift. Just look at the number of people killed by wolves, and you can consult the registers of many communes throughout Europe, actually. And then after that, just end of it. Now, the wolves have been keeping this distance from humans. But wolves, as I said, sorry if I repeat that again and again, that are the most adaptable animal on earth. So they can change. And one of the roots of this adaptability is the fact that wolves are not all the same. There is the timid animal, the shy animals, the bold animals, the very active, and so on, depending on age, social status, and so on. So you may have one wolf that actually look at the kids and say, what is this? Could that be good food? And come close and grab the kid just to test it. You know the story because it's happened to you, but it's happened in many other places, including in Rome. Last year, we had a kid that was really grabbed by a wolf, and the father of the kid just intervened and chased the wolf again. away. But now, while we are talking, we have two wolves, a pair, one with a radio collar, in one of the main villas downtown Roma. And nobody says, no human taking us a walk in that villa has ever seen that wolf. But we know that it's there by the radio collars. So you see, let's take in account the individual variability of wolves. And let's not make a story that is valid for all of them.
Yes, and I believe, there's a lot of truth in history as well as Luigi sketches wolves in the past, in, late Middle Age Renaissance Europe up until the 19th century. There were clear indications of attacks on people, also laid down in police reports and so forth, especially children and weak people. And of course, this was exacerbated by factors like rabies and wars and famine and young people being sent out to herd sheep and cattle and so forth. And indeed, after the gun and poison, etc., was introduced, the wolf was decimated quite a lot. And actually, in remote areas, the wolf remained. Of course, there was less interaction, and now it has returned from these remote areas in larger numbers. There's always a bigger chance that individual wolves, due to their personality and certain factors, will do the wrong thing. Not saying that all wolves will do that, but I think the majority of wolves will probably remain shy. But the chance is higher that these interactions will occur in the future, unfortunately. And it's a smart animal. It's an intelligent animal, and well, it will try out new situations, new opportunities.
Talking about dogs, Luigi, we have a lot of dogs in the Netherlands. In 70% of cases involving bold behavior, I read that in a report, dogs play a role. In the Netherlands, we have around 1.7 million dogs, and they live in a relatively small area. Do you think this significantly increases the chances of wolves becoming habituated to humans more quickly because they approach the dog and then they find out the human is all right, so that makes them less shy to humans?
Well, dogs are an easy prey for wolves. The problem is that it has happened already here in Italy, that the wolves will come close to the humans to prey on the dog. The owner of the dog tried to react, and he will get a bite, like you would get a bite if you tried to separate your dog from another dog when they meet in the street. The same thing, just exactly the same pattern. And this is potentially dangerous, of course, because a bite from a wolf in a fight with a dog, it could, you never know what could happen. Certainly, coexistence with dogs is difficult. And I would invite all those who have a dog not to walk in a wolf area, because that's an invitation to the wolf to come close and test this potential good prey, which is your dog.
Then a very serious problem. We have blind people in the Netherlands. I suppose you have them in Italy as well. And some of them have a guide dog. And some of them live in wolf area. And I've talked to two persons who said, Debbie, we can't go everywhere where we used to go because we can't see the wolf. And we're afraid that we will meet the wolf and that the wolf will kill our guide dog. How do you go about that in Italy?
Well, honestly, I've never heard of these problems anywhere else in Europe, but possibly because nowhere else we find the conditions that you have in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is basically a big garden, is not a nature area. And so it is normal, I would say, to have a blind person walking through anywhere in the Netherlands. But I also suppose that this problem is not spread homogeneously all over the country. So there may be specific places and areas where this might be a problem. then it should be managed within the framework of a general management plan of the wolf. And if in those particular cases you have a conflict, again, the wolf should be removed.
Is there any data on what specific behaviors wolves show when they have been fed?
If a wolf has been fed without any danger to him, he would come back for more food. Why not? It's so easy. So if you see a wolf repeatedly coming close to humans who are actually feeding them, well, that's an indication of an habituated animal. It's a very difficult to reverse that behavior, by the way.
I asked the question because in dogs, you see that when dogs are used to being fed, the food usually comes from the pocket or out of a bag. So most dogs discriminate. If they see a person with a bag, they say, hey, he's the one that's going to feed me. Persons without a bag, they leave it alone. And I would assume that wolves can discriminate as well.
I don't know of any data supporting this. It may well be, but it remains a good hypothesis for a good research. The problem is that we don't have many data. I mean, not many cases to make it statistically significant.
Yeah.
Well, if we wait a while, you can come to the Netherlands for that.
We already had one case, which was about 2 years ago, where we had one young wolf that was unintentionally fed at a picnic area where there was a lot of fast food restaurants in the neighborhood, and people would go there and discard their litter, half-eaten food. And this wolf actually came a lot to this place, and it didn't show any aggression. In the end, it hasn't shown any aggression as well. So that doesn't always mean when a wolf is fed that it will eventually show aggression, but certainly it's undesirable. We should manage this. Maybe looking at the United States, where they said, say, a fed bear is a dead bear, and we should have higher fines in areas where people discard their rubbish in the presence of wolves.
Luigi, got a question for you. In the 2024 Bold Behavior Report on page 32, there is a distinction made between small, medium, and large countries based on the availability of semi-natural habitats. The Netherlands falls into the smallest category. What does this mean in your view for how we should interpret a favorable conservation status in the Netherlands?
That's a very complicated question, Debbie, and it would require an hour discussion only on this. We produce a report on how to handle the concept of favorable conservation status throughout Europe, and we make a distinction of FCS, which is favorable conservation status, FCS at population scale and at country scale. It is obvious that a country like Luxembourg cannot have the same number of wolves as Germany, of course. Now, so when we speak of a population, we speak of an entity that is relatively homogeneous in terms of numbers of wolves, densities, ecology, and way of management. So it's not a biological population. It's just a population in terms of management. And when we speak of that, we suggest that we should aim for favorable conservation status at population level that secure the long-term conservation of wolves. Then, within the population, there are the individual countries, and each one should contribute to the overall population for what they can, for what they decide. And it's a political decision, Debbie. Now, the political decision has to be informed by what happened at the population scale. So at population scale, you have to get together and say, okay, you, Germany, you are large, you have large areas, you can have this, you agree. And Netherlands can agree to have 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 50 packs, whatever you decide. And then stick on that, knowing that that requires constant management, daily management, not once in a while when you find a new Bram that causes trouble. Managing a wolf population, it's a daily job.
May I ask a question, Debbie, on that? Luigi, what do say if we wanted to manage or state we wanted to have 10 wolf packs maximum in the Netherlands? What would the effect of management be? Because if you start hunting wolves, would that have side effects?
On what? On wolves, you mean?
On the behavior of wolves, destabilization of packs, so forth.
No. I mean, destabilization of packs it's a reality, and you may have the pack that disperse and moves more than you wanted to. If that pack was used to attack livestock, they may become more dependent on livestock because of their reduced capability of hunting prey, I mean, wild prey. And so, yes, it is true. There is a long unresolved debate among wolf management whether you should shoot within the wolf population as you wish or remove individual packs. Fine, you can remove the individual packs if you wish. I'm not really very much excited by this discussion, and I think it's quite irrelevant in the end. What really makes a difference is that we should be aware that a wolf population can increase up to 34% a year, which is a huge increase.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So knowing that, we know that we have to intervene quite quickly on the basis of the political decisions. Do the Dutch people be ready? Are they ready to have wolves downtown Amsterdam? Yes. Okay, let's go.
We'll see. Thank you.
No, I know that it's not possible. That, you know, if people ask, I mean, we in a city like Rome or Amsterdam, there are millions of people. So if you ask me, I mean, I'm very happy to have wolves down in my garden because I know, the only problem is I have to keep the dog inside, but that's it. But there are many other people who absolutely don't want that. And politics is the art of finding an agreement among all the diversity.
Yeah, and even though the wolf is a symbol of the birth of Rome, Lupina.
Did you, when you first started to get the wolf protected again, and did you expect the troubles that are now coming out here in the Netherlands with the wolf?
Well, if I think of the first data that I was collecting in 72, certainly no. No, I didn't even think that the wolves could get to the Alps at that time. And now we have one of the largest population in the Alps from France to Slovenia. So the wolves are fascinating animals indeed because of this. They will never stop fascinating the people working on them. They always offer new information, new data, new views. Until a few years ago, we didn't know that more than one female can reproduce in the same pack. I mean, biology was stuck on the idea that there is only one pair with a female only. Now we know that this is just an option. It's not always like that. And I'm sure there will be other aspects of wolf biology that we don't know yet. But that's why I've been suggesting, sorry, this is because I'm biased as a researcher, I've been suggesting always, why don't we put more radio collars on this wolf, especially in the Netherlands, because you are unique in the coexistence with 600, if I'm not wrong, 600 people per square kilometer. So you really are an outlier in the Netherlands, and studying wolves there would be extremely interesting. But we need many more radio collars.
That brings me to the question. We have organizations in the Netherlands, and maybe you have them in Italy as well, that defend the individual animal, even when that animal possesses a risk to society. In your opinion, do they provide a necessary counterbalance, or do they make the situation more complicated?
They certainly make the situation more complicated, but I would not love to see them vanish away. They are a component of our society. They represent some important ethical aspect, and they should sit around the desk, where the desk I was mentioning earlier about, where all the stakeholders are there and trying to push forward their opinions. So whether they are important or not for conservation, it's a very complicated question, Debbie. And we know that it's possible to combine many elements of the animalist or animal right approach with those of the ecologist. They are not in oppositions.
Is it harmful for a wolf to get radio colored?
Well, you can think that he would prefer not to have a radio colors, but all the information and all data that we have from many studies, from the early radio collars in North America in the early 70s to Europe and everywhere, we know that wolves' behavior and wolves' ecology is not affected by radio collars. We have had mothers being radio collared just before giving birth. We have female radio collars in the den. We have had radio collars on all kind of situations, and the behavior that we observe has been always like, normal, like the other one. So I would say that compare to the potential discomfort, the amount of data and the advantage for managing the same wolf are enormous.
You're back, Erwin. I asked how harmful radio coloring a wolf is. That was the question. Do you want to say something about that?
Well, certainly, what I think what's important, we have a unique situation in the Netherlands of wolves living in a very intensely cultivated landscapes, one of the most intensive landscapes in the world. A lot of people, a lot of interaction between wolves and people interests. So what we should have is a proper research agenda, I think, in the Netherlands. It hasn't been set up yet. Setting out proper research questions. When we color wolves, why do we color wolves? What do we want to know? How many wolves do we want to color, etc. I think we're just at the start of that, and we should have it as Luigi suggests, and I fully agree.
My suggestion is to select one pack and focus on that. I would not disperse energies and funds and radio colors among several packs just to find out what they do. Let's say choose a region and then one or two packs, neighboring each other, focus on that. Especially would be very important to radio colors, so younger animals are ready to disperse, just to find out how they survive and how they cope with an environment like the one in the Netherlands or nearby Belgium.
Yeah, and of course we already have with some of the packs we have a very intensive camera network to follow the movements of wolves, also to look into what they eat in terms of wild prey, which is also quite amazing. When the first wolves came into the Netherlands, I always thought that there might not be enough wild prey for them outside of the deer areas and the wild boar areas. But what I'm seeing is that wolves can thrive even in landscapes where there's only roe deer and hares, for example. They do quite well. And we can still learn a lot more about their behavior, raiding chicken farms, for example, like foxes do.
Luigi, when the wolf first came to the Netherlands, they said the wolves don't jump, they like to dig. Now we find out that wolves jump. What's your opinion about jumping and digging and wolf fencing?
I'm really fascinated. The person who said, no, they don't jump or dig, it should be removed. Why do you just open the mouth and say something without knowing anything about biology? Wolves can jump. Of course they can jump.
Yeah, but
Why
Luigi,
not?
they said so many things about wolves. In the beginning, a wolf would never attack a horse, it would never attack a dog. And I've been amazed by these suggestions.
But it's not. We are not talking about the being from Mars or from the moon. There have been tons of paper published on wolves, and the wolf is one of the most studied animals on earth. So we know a lot. Why don't just look at the literature before opening the mouth and saying something that is idiot? Wolves can jump. A female wolf in an enclosure in front of me, who was approaching her, she felt pressed by me toward the fence, and she jumped 3.5 meters all by herself. I mean, wolves don't do that normally, of course. You may say that that was a special case. It is, okay. But 2 meters fence is nothing for a wolf. Of course,
Yeah,
if there is a hole, they may prefer to dig, or they may decide to dig. You never know. It depends on the local situation. The number of variables when you are in the field are so high that you can't predict always with certainty what's going to happen.
exactly.
Okay, they can jump high. If there are farmers listening to this, they will probably argue then it's no use for me to put a wolf fence on my land because he can come over anyway.
No, the wolf fence are normally electrified. And so you can have a fence of 2 meters and one or two electric wire outside the fence, just 20 or 30 centimeter from the fence itself. That will prevent the wolf to launch itself over the fence. So you can have that. I mean, in Abruzzo, in central Italy, we have had livestock for ages, and even today they are there. And the fence, the electric fence, short one, with the help of the guarding dog, it's enough. Anybody is welcome to go to the Abruzzo and look and talk to the shepherds.
Yeah.
There is one that is there, I'm just talking a few weeks ago, with 1,000 sheep, and he has lost 0 last year. 0 sheep to the bear and to the wolf.
But if I understand correctly, you say you have the electric fence, and then let's say 30 centimeters or more before the electric fence, there
Exactly.
is also a wire with
Exactly.
electricity on it.
Exactly.
And that is different, Erwin, I hope you agree with me, that's different from the advice given here in the Netherlands, because they say have an electric fence and have the wire 20 centimeters up, and then another one and another one. But these wires are very close to the fence.
I think so, but we also have examples of, say, people putting up double fencing, electric fencing with 8,000 volts, and a wolf still jumping. So it's always a case, I think, of an individual wolf learning to jump the fence or not being scared of the fence. I've also seen examples of wolves being hit by electricity and coming back the next day and jump the fence, same fence again. So that's also individuality that's in play. So we have to deal with, always that there are exceptions to the rule. And also say, well, it's better always to put up a fence, because putting the key into the door will always invite people, burglars in as well. So we should always do something, and perhaps look into more smart solutions in the future that we can make better deterrents.
Yes, and then let me just make a very broad comment on the on the wolf livestock interaction. There is no way to reduce the risk to 0.
Yeah.
No way. But what is important is to reduce the risk to a tolerable level. So if a shepherd lose 2-3 sheep in a year, it's nothing. Probably disease would kill more than that. But if a shepherd lose 300 sheep, then it's a problem. Or even 30 is a problem. So what I'm saying is that all current techniques to prevent wolf predation on livestock, those that work, are able to prevent mass killing, but do not reduce the risk to 0. And then we should be very honest on this.
I agree.
In Germany, there was this wolf called Gloria who repeatedly jumped over high fences. in theory, if she has kids, she can teach them to do the same thing. Do you think it's necessary to take a wolf like that out of the population?
Kids are not all the same. You may have one that is bold and active and who just follow mother's behavior, and you may have other who are more shy and timid and just wait outside the fence. You may have some that is really smart and don't run any risk, just waiting for the others to come out with some food and so on. You can have all sorts of behavior. And yeah, removing an animal that has learned to avoid all the prevention measure is an option. Is an option, absolutely. Why not? And we should never forget that as you say, wolves can learn a lot, especially the pups can learn from mothers and fathers, and they can take up some convenient behavior for them if it doesn't bring any harm or any risk.
I read the report, The Fear of Wolves, a review of wolf attacks on humans by John Linnell. He explains 4 factors that were always there when there was an incident with wolves, and there are not many incidents. That was rabies, and we don't have that in the Netherlands. I don't think we have it in the west of Europe anywhere.
No.
Then we had habituation. We have that in the Netherlands with some wolves. Artificial landscape. Well, we really have that in the Netherlands. And the other thing is provocation. Because that was said so specifically in that report, is it not wise that an organization like Large Carnivore will pay attention to that and advise on that, how to cope with a situation like that?
Well, coping with what? Because we can cope with provocation, of course, and teach people not to provoke an attack, which today is probably the most important factors among all those that you mentioned. And we cannot change the landscape of the Netherlands, of course. So the only thing that we can do is to put an extra effort compared to the rest of Europe. And I think that Netherlands actually should consider an extra effort in keeping the distance between humans and wolves. This may mean a tougher set of rules to contain wolves that are actually encroaching human areas compared to the rest of Europe. But I would be in favor. And that would be the cost of coexistence in the Netherlands, which obviously it's a higher cost than coexisting, for example, in the Alps or in the central Spain or whatever.
We have 2 or 3 cases in the Netherlands where a wolf has bitten someone. If he only bites one time and then we don't see the wolf again for months, do you still consider that wolf a threat?
Well, this is a very good question because we don't have enough data to come up with a statistically significant answer to the question. So I would say that I would watch the situation very carefully. And in the end, you want to assess the level of risk that you are ready to take. If it's an area where a new encounter with humans is likely but not so important, then I would probably stay and watch for another case. But on the other hand, if the case is in a very highly dense human area or in a recreation park or where lots of children are around and left free to roam, then I would probably act toward the removal of that animal. So I'm sorry I'm not giving you a sharp answer, but it's very much depending on the context there.
You're the wolf expert, but isn't it not a good idea then to radio color a wolf like that so that we can see where he is going?
Absolutely. I've been pushing for radio collaring as many wolves as possible, especially in areas where coexistence with humans is high. And in the case that you just mentioned, radio colony would be certainly a very, very good help.
Some people say we should leave nature alone, and they claim that wolves will regulate themselves in case of the danger of overpopulation. Is that true?
Wolves do not regulate themselves as such. It's food that regulates them. And in a country like the Netherlands, there is plenty of food everywhere. Wild food, domestic food, and everything else. So wolf population would increase up to the level where there is a limit posed by the amount and availability of food. So, and normally this level in a heavily humanized area like Europe is higher than we are able to support. So that's why at certain level and in certain case, wolf removal is necessary to keep it in balance with our needs and our possibilities. Now, all that is not to be done on the basis of feelings, of dreams, or wrong information. It should be strongly science-based. Scientists today have the possibility of calculating how many wolves are there, how much they can increase, predict the trajectory of the population in the next few years and so on, and can give advice. But then, in the end, the final decision, as I said before, is again political. It's the political decision of all the stakeholders that brings together, all stakeholders around the table to find to decide where they want to go. What is the limit? And what's the cost that the local community is ready to pay? Of course, there are international regulations that we have to comply with. For example, we are all in Europe, and in Europe, the basic law on environment is the Habitat Directive, and the Habitat Directive says very clear things on the wolf is a protected species, regardless where he is especially protected or protected. All countries are bound to maintain the wolf population in favorable conservation status. Now, we can discuss around this concept of what it means and the compromise that can be done around this concept. But let's not forget that we are part of a continent, and wolves are spread all over the continent, and we have to work together to have a final solution on our coexistence with these animals.
The wolf has been downlisted in the Habitat Directive, but on 17th December 2025, there were 213 organizations that signed a letter asking to put the wolf back to the highest form of protection. Do you agree with that? And if you do, I think you do, why is it so necessary for the wolf to be strictly protected?
Downlisting is not a tragedy per se, and it actually would mean a very good thing. That is, the species doesn't need to be protected because it's doing fine. So I'm not against the downlisting per se. But in the case of the wolf, we all felt very bad because the decision was clearly a political decision made on the basis of political advantage for some parties against the others. So we as a LCIE even wrote a position statement saying that the downleasing was actually premature, and we didn't see the need for downleasing. You always had all the possible flexibility in removing animals that had to be removed or keeping the population at lower level through the derogation system that was already there in the Habitat Directive. So there was no need to rush for the downlisting as has been done. And we are worried that this could be the first case of a long series of potential downlisting on other protected species across Europe. That's a serious problem.
Wolves survived in the eastern part of Europe, when we had the border between the eastern and western part of Europe. Nobody watched it, nobody regulated it, they just did it by themselves. Correct?
No, they
No.
were hunted in many places.
Okay, that makes it even. That makes my question even more urgent, because now we regulate it, we count them, and you have a number from which you say we need that amount of wolves to make sure that the population keeps healthy. But the population has kept healthy while they were hunted and while there were less wolves when they lived in the eastern part of Europe.
You are touching a very, very delicate issue, Debbie. That is the role of hunting in conservation, which is a very, very interesting issue. For many species, hunting is actually one of the reasons why the species is conserved. Just mention another species, not wolves, mention bears. And the bears in Croatia have been hunted since ever. And in Slovenia, they have many bears. But because they are hunted and there is an economy around this hunting, that actually is very important, and people are aware of that and wants to have many bears and ready to the compromise needed to coexist with bears because they know that there will be an economic return. On top of that, there is the let's say, the philosophical decision by the European Union as such, when they established the Habitat Directive, they want to see more nature in Europe. They want to see more, I shouldn't say wilderness because we don't have any real wilderness, but certainly more wild areas, more species coming back to all over Europe. And so they established the Habitat Directive that protects species and different level of protections, establish protected areas where is needed for that. And so the whole philosophy of conservation actually is one of the pillars of the European Union politics. So protecting the wolf is part of that, and was done when there were few wolves in the West, especially in the West. Now the wolf is spreading around, so the downlisting could be managed if there were in place a number of tools like strong monitoring, planning, cooperation across boundaries, and all that, then downlisting is not a tragedy. Unfortunately, many of those tools are not very well in place yet.
Last two questions. Luigi, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions held by both supporters and opponents of the wolf?
David Beach, my good friend, wrote a paper a few years ago saying, are we sanctifying the wolf? And that is the major danger. I mean, I've been fighting all my life, in the early years of my life with wolves, against those who wanted to kill all wolves. And there were many. The majority of people were there. As wolf conservation progressed through the year, I saw the birth of this movement in favor of the wolves, but in favor in a fundamentalist way. So I think we should treat the fundamentalist on the right or on the left at the same time. Those who want to kill all the wolves are, in my opinion, stupid people. And those who want to save any wolves at any cost are also stupid at the same level. We try and we trust society to finding a way in between, based on rationality and based on the inevitable compromise that we have to make among all components of society. Our democratic life, it's an example of a compromise, always. But we take this compromise as a basis for our common life. And we should do the same with wolves, as with any other issue on nature conservation.
There was an American biologist, also a wolf expert. I just forgot his name, but he had a really nice saying that of all the wild animals, the wolf asks the most wisdom of humans. And I think you can interpret that in many ways. We should be wise, but also, the wolf has very beautiful aspects, but we should also be realistic sometimes.
Last question. If Dutch policymakers were to take just one message from your work, Luigi, what should it be?
My main message is that there is not a solution good for all. If something works in central Italy, it's not certain that it will work in the Netherlands and vice versa. And sometimes even in the same country. What works in central Italy does not work in the Alps. So my main message is that use all possible knowledge from your animals, from your ecological situation, and from the existing literature and the expert in the field, real expert, and make a plan. Make a plan, possibly at the largest scale possible. In the Netherlands, it obviously has to be at national scale, not a provincial scale. So make a plan and stick to that. And then monitor. I know that this is seems obvious to the Netherlands because you do a lot of monitoring and you do it well. But in many other countries, they don't do it. So they apply some rules and then forget to look what's the outcome of those rules.
I want to thank both of you for joining me. Thank you, Luigi. Thank you, Erwin.